Download this code and get free GPT-4o from codegive.com, link in the description below. Debugging scenarios in a make.com, formerly integromat, integration can be quite essential to ensure that your automated workflows, scenarios, function as intended. Here's a step-by-step beginner's tutorial on how to debug make.com scenarios, including code examples where applicable. ####tutorial, debugging make.com scenarios. ####Step 1, understanding make.com scenarios. Make.com allows you to create automation workflows that connect various apps and services. Each workflow is made up of modules which perform specific tasks. When building these scenarios, it's common to encounter issues that need debugging. Step 2, enable debugging mode. Before starting to debug, you should ensure that your scenario is in edit mode. Here's how to enable debugging. 1. Open your scenario, go to your make.com dashboard and select the scenario you want to debug. 2. Edit mode, click on the scenario to enter the edit mode. 3. Enable debugging, click the Run Once button in the top right corner. This will execute the scenario and allow you to see what happens during the run. Step 3, inspect the execution history. 1. Execution history, after running your scenario, click on the History tab. This will show you a list of executions. 2. View details, click on the specific execution to see detailed logs. You can view the input and output of each module. Example scenario. Let's assume you have a scenario that is supposed to fetch data from an API and send it to a Google Sheet. Below is an example of how to debug it. 1. Module setup. HTTP module, get data from an API. Google Sheets module, create a new row in a sheet with the fetched data. Step 4, check the input and output. 1. HTTP module, click on the HTTP module in the scenario. Check the configuration. URL, ensure the API endpoint is correct. Headers, verify if your API requires any authentication headers. Example of a correct HTTP module configuration. JSON. URL, https://api.example.com/data. Method, get. Headers. Authorization, bearer your _access _token. To run the module, click on the Run Once button again and observe the output of the HTTP module. If the output is not as expected, check the API documentation for any changes or errors. Step 5, inspect the data flow. 1. Connect to Google Sheets. Once the HTTP module is successfully fetching data, check the Google Sheets module. 2. Mapping data, ensure you are correctly mapping the output of the HTTP module to the input fields of the Google Sheets module. Example of mapping. If you fetched a user's name from the API, ensure that you map it correctly to the corresponding column in Google Sheets. Step 6, handling errors. If you encounter an error. 1. Error messages, check the error messages displayed in the execution history. 2. Common issues. Authentication errors, ensure that you have the correct credentials. Data type mismatches, ensure that the data types being sent to Google Sheets are compatible, example numbers versus strings. Step 7, testing and iteration. After making changes, rerun the scenario using the Run Once button. Continue checking the execution history and making adjustments until the scenario runs without errors. Hashtag additional tips for debugging. Use log module. Insert a log module in your scenario to output variables at different stages. This can help you track the flow of data. Test in stages. If the scenario is complex, test it in stages. Run individual modules to verify their outputs before connecting them. Documentation and community. Leverage Make.com's documentation and community forums for additional support and examples. Conclusion. Debugging Make.com scenarios involves systematically checking each module, verifying inputs and outputs, and making necessary adjustments. By following the steps outlined in this tutorial, you will be better equipped to troubleshoot and resolve issues in your scenarios. Happy automating!